Welcome in. It's Sunday Night Roundtable brought to you by Broadway Sports Media. I'm sure you're here like we're here because we just got to watch 4 hours of the Titans throwing up all over their own shoes. So welcome in. We're going to do a lot of bitching. A lot of bitching. A lot of bitching. Hope everybody's having a good night. Where do we start? Because I don't have anything positive to say about this game. I'm so fucking pissed off that the Titans went to New York, did absolutely nothing. I don't want to hear shit about they didn't have offensive weapons and they had injuries. This was a garbage ass team on the field today. And Easton nailed it before the broadcast. If Tennessee had to lean on Henry for 30 plus carries, this team failed at moving the offense, and that's exactly what they did. 33 carries this man had in a losing effort. Outside of Jeremy McNichols, one of the few things that worked on offense. Boring, am I wrong? Am I off base? Where am I?
No, I think the first half was a fine game. They failed to finish, but they were clearly the better team in the first half. They were +1 in the turnover margin. In fact, the best part about this game is do turnovers matter? This is the first game that the Titans have actually won the turnover battle and lost the game. So that's something. It's kind of an interesting thing. They have won 3 games in which they lost the turnover battle and lost the game against when they actually won that. So for me, look, the Titans, they didn't show up in the second half, and there were things coming in here where you had to question what their actual goals were. I do think you saw signs where they were trying to limit some Henry carries coming into this game, and they ran into a bad combination with injuries, and frankly, Ryan Tannehill had his worst game of the season.
Ryan, before I let Easton have his moment in the sunshine, Ryan, go. Yeah, my thoughts exactly.
Listen, I got to apologize to everyone first and foremost because I said in the first at halftime hits that I didn't think the offensive line had been that awful. Yes, there were some things to clean up. I also assumed that they were going to clean some of this crap up and not give up more sacks. David Questenberry just was terrible. I mean, there's no way around it. You know, the rest of the offensive line didn't contribute. They opened up some big running holes, but again, they didn't give Tannehill time. Combo that with Tannehill held onto the effing ball way too long in a lot of situations as well. This offense just wasn't clicking on any cylinders whatsoever. Not even all cylinders. I would have taken half the cylinders. They weren't clicking on any cylinders today. And you combo that with your defense playing a pretty good game until they give up some junk plays to Zach Wilson of all people. And it's a bad day. And I've gone into our private chat here into my negative space and my dark place. And I don't know what's going to pull me out of it. Zach Zach always compliments me about being one of the happiest, positive people that he knows, but not today. I can't do it today. This was just utter trash in the second half.
Easton, please, the floor is yours.
Well, there was one positive thing, I think, and it's that they lost because I hate ties so much, and they deserve to lose. So I'm glad that they lost. And it's almost worse to tie against that Jets team because if you tie against that Jets team all season long, you're talking about the 7-5-1 Titans, and you get to just be reminded every single time of what happened in week 4. And so perhaps this loss can go in the loss column with the others and be forgotten. I sure hope it's forgotten, but I'm sure that it won't be, just like the Cincinnati loss wasn't forgotten last year, but this is an infinitely worse loss. Listen, I think it really is important for us that they were down a lot of players, and this Jets team, you know, their defense is pretty good. And of course, these are all nonsense excuses that we're going to be hearing all week, and that's a bunch of BS. The reality is this Jets team is by far the worst team in the league, both on paper and in their production the last 3 weeks. This is a Jets team that had 20 points in the first 3 games. They put up 27 today against this Titans defense, which apparently was getting better. This is news to me based on what I just saw, because that was just as bad, if not worse, than what we saw last year from the Titans. This was a Titans offense that was anemic in every way. I got a lot of flack online before the game talking about how this was going to be a failure for the Titans today. Like you said, if Derrick Henry has to run the ball 30 plus times. And the hang up for a lot of people was, if Derrick runs 30 times, it could be a blowout. We could be blowing him out and he runs 30 times. And I had to explain, my point wasn't that it was a failure if Derrick Henry runs the ball 30 times. My point was, it's a failure if Derrick Henry has to run the ball 30 times. And today he had to run the ball 35 plus some odd times, and they still lost the game to the New York Jets. Okay. So this offense with all these wide receivers, which we were told all training camp and all season leading up to this game, this wide receiver room that was supposed to be the deepest position group on the entire team. We were supposed to have wide receivers behind our two starters. Behind the two starters, the Titans were supposed to have wide receivers as good or better than each other. They were all potential wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 options. They were getting healthier. They were going to come in and against this mediocre Jets pass defense, which was missing both of their starting safeties today, they were going to be able to hang in there and produce just enough passing game to be able to handle the Jets like they were supposed to as the touchdown, some odd favorite that they were coming into this game. And so that wasn't the case. The only positive thing on either side of the ball was Harold Landry, who looked incredible again, but it wasn't enough. And Jeremy McNichols, who looked incredible, but it also wasn't enough. So it's just a complete and utter failure for the Titans. It's the worst loss since I can't remember the last time they had a loss this bad. It's going to define them, not just this week in the media, but it's going to define them at least for the next 2, because they play the Jaguars and they could beat the Jaguars 59-0 and it wouldn't matter because they lost to the Jets. And they're going to be coming up on this 4-game stretch. Sorry, I know I'm ranting, but they're going to be coming up on this 4-game stretch after the Jets, where they play the Chiefs and they play the Colts and they play the Bills and they play another NFC West team, I believe. This 4-game stretch, which is incredibly difficult on the schedule. It's the Rams,
Bills, Chiefs, Indy, and Rams. Yeah, and
right. They're playing. Yeah. Okay. So those 5 teams. Well, the Saints. Well, the Saints. But those 4 teams.
Hey, they lost to the Jets. I'm not counting on anybody at this point.
I know it's a good point. But in terms of powerful teams that you're going to have to really show up for, they got 4 massive games after this week's Week 5 matchup against the Jaguars that are going to be massively important. And unless they show up and win a couple of those games, this is going to be what defines this Titans team this season.
So for the Jets, CJ Mosley, Quincy Williams, Quincy Williams, John Franklin, Bryce Huff. Do you know what all those names share in common? They all had a sack against Tannehill for this game.
In the same game?
Given up in the same game. All those players I just listed off individually had a sack. Sack clinic coming across the board for the Jets. This is where I want to start. With the Titans O-line, how many of these sacks were just poor O-line play? How much of it was Tannehill not getting the ball out fast enough or just not feeling the pressure?
That'll come in review. That'll come in review of the game, obviously, because it's kind of hard, even with the replays that they show, to get a good handle on. Of course, and we don't know the protection scheme as well, because I know that there was a couple sacks early on. One of which was definitely on Derrick Henry. He didn't break off his play action fake to get in the face of the linebacker in time, and Tannehill goes down. There was another time that was on Tannehill himself, where the running back was flaring out immediately, and there was a linebacker coming uncovered, but the offensive line had slid over big to the right, and the tackle was on his big responsibility by himself. So it's got to be on Tannehill to see it. Though it's 3rd and long, we covered that. But then Quessenberry, I think, gave up 3 himself, like on different plays that were just on him. But again, Tannehill is borderline. I think the problem is Tannehill is borderline trying to force things and make things happen instead of just letting it rip. And he was holding on a little bit. So I think it's kind of both. But clearly, if you at least can hold up for an extra second for your offensive line, then Tannehill holding on to the ball doesn't matter. And if Tannehill can just get rid of the ball, then the offensive line matters less. But I mean, my point is that I think it's on everybody today. This failure was on the offense as a whole. I know that Derrick Henry had a good game, but that doesn't matter in this point. When you're looking back on it, 33 carries for 150 whatever yards it was and a touchdown. It's good. It's a good game, and Tannehill didn't have bad numbers either. But again, he had 7 sacks for whatever the yardage was there. That's terrible. And you can't operate like this against any NFL team. I don't care if it's the Jets, the Panthers, the Jaguars, whoever it is in front of you. You can't have that day. You saw it a couple years ago or whatever that was when the Ravens just absolutely dominated the Titans offensive line as well. So my one thing is that hopefully this wakes some people up, and that this is something they can learn from and carry forward. That's the only positive I can really take from this, is that this experience can wake this team up, because they have been kind of slogging through the season to this point. And of course they played down to the Jets, but you can't be this kind of team and boast that you're one of the best teams in the AFC. And I'm starting to doubt if they are one of those best teams in the AFC.
By the way, Vrabel's at the podium now. Seeing live updates trickle out. I'll see if I can throw those in there as we work through this. Boren, I want to throw this comment that's in chat. Quessenberry's a great story. But he doesn't belong in the football field. Also, when you're missing both of your wide receivers, it shows. It also shows why we had such an effing bad, or it also shows how just fucking bad our D is in the D scheme. Let me start with the first part with Quessenberry. This feels on base to me. I don't know. How do you feel?
Well, coming to you with the offensive line question is a bold move. I'm more
Yeah.
the defensive back question. You
That's
set me
right.
up. I thought you were going one direction, and then you switched it back. So now I'm back on offensive line here, and I'm going to go with it. Quessenberry, I don't think was terrible in the first half. I don't think the team as a whole was terrible in the first half, but in the second half, you saw where, in fact, on halftime hits, I said that the Titans. Fortunately, you haven't seen a lot of one-on-one matchups. It's been schematic things that you can kind of clean up and see kind of the things that the coaches are throwing at you. But they hadn't lost a lot of one-on-one matchups, which I think ultimately, obviously, cursed the Titans because in the second half they just got completely worked in one-on-one matchups. Especially Quessenberry, you kind of saw a guy there that was the justification for the reason they have taken someone who you thought would play right tackle for 2 straight seasons in the first and second round of the NFL draft. He is a good guy that you could step in a pinch. If he is your regular starter, these are the kind of halves that you can kind of expect to see.
Are you missing Dennis Kelly yet? Anybody?
I mean, I miss an O-line that looks like that they can play competent football from first down to fourth down. You know, last year with the defense, it was the Titans couldn't get off the field for third down. Now this entire game, and I felt it ripple through our chat as we were watching it, I could bear to stomach watching our offense play third down today. I mean, I think all the sacks, I'll have to go back and quantify that, but I feel like almost every single sack came on third down. And a
bunch of them did. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't, it leads into a larger problem that Titans fans have dealt with for years, which is, and someone else pointed out in the chat before it scrolled by, which was constantly playing down to teams. I know it's hard to quantify that across multiple regimes, but what is it with the Titans, Easton, and playing down to bad play, to bad teams, to bad offenses? The Jets are a bad offense. Zach, this is the highest passing yardage that Zach Wilson has put up all year, and of course, it comes against the Titans. What the hell is the problem?
Well, we talk about the Titans being a team with great culture, and frankly, I don't know that there's an answer to that question besides poor culture. I guess you can have a good culture in some aspects, but in terms of a culture of playing your game every week, regardless of the opponent, I don't know how you can justify the argument for that being in existence for the Titans. They seem to tailor their level of interest or specific game plan to how good or bad they think each team is.
Oh, Jesus.
Job done. Perhaps.
It's the Titans all over again.
It's the Titans who run the Wi-Fi.
It's a heart attack every single game.
It is truly the Titans because he was great in the first half.
And
Completely just fell apart in the second half.
Oh my gosh.
Am I back now?
Sort of. I'm not sure what's going on. Now you back and then you left. It's no, but to your point is that you can't. Again, this ties back to you can't claim to be one of the best teams in the AFC and be Super Bowl contenders and continue to play down to teams that are truly lesser than your roster, even with the receivers that are out. There's no excuses for this. And I agree with Jesse Jones here. You know, you can't have excuses for this. You have to come out ready to play. And again, this team always seems to play better when their backs are against the wall. And it kind of took that in this game. You saw a little bit more life from them. It wasn't enough, obviously, because they lost, but you can't keep waiting to get punched in the mouth to respond. Sometimes you have to punch. Sometimes you have to punch someone else in the mouth first and take the game to them. So that's my big problem here is the Titans have that lack of killer instinct where you want to step on someone's throat and not let off. They sometimes have had that, but it's been few and far between over these last couple of seasons. And you're talking about the positives of more of, oh, look at how they had the fortitude to come back in this game and stay in it. And they're never, out of any game, blah, blah, blah. But how about just get on top of somebody and not let them off the mat? I don't know.
And let's just clarify before we move on. I'll only speak for me, but I can imagine it's the same for the three of you. There are no excuses coming from me. There is no excuse for this game. And I think anybody this week making excuses is either in pay of the team or
Pom-poms in their hands.
a hack.
We got
Yeah,
pom-poms.
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 Yeah, pom-poms.
Pom-poms.
We got our pom-poms. So
Terrible game.
And this is what I want to discuss. It's not trying to be, and I told you so, but earlier in the week, I'd pointed out that I felt like this was a bit of a trap game, even though it's a term I hate. But I had some nervousness going into this just based on the number of injuries and the Titans' history in playing down to bad teams. This felt like a game. This felt like going into the Bengals last year, where everyone was just convinced we were going to rip the Bengals O-line apart, and it went the complete opposite direction. Where I'm going with that is this. Everyone, including myself in my own podcast, talked about how the Jets and the Jags were tune-up games going into Bills Chiefs and the back end of this pretty brutal schedule the Titans have leading into their bye week. I'm suddenly the Titans to me go in playing the Jags as a pick'em, and before you laugh in my face, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Trevor Lawrence is a better quarterback right now than Zach Wilson. Give me some positives out of this game. Does anyone have any positives that we can take from this going into the Jags?
Look, as somebody who will just completely dunk on a team, but also I really feel like I'm the least emotional person that you know. I'll just, whatever. I'm right here. I would say that when you look at the Titans, they played a very bad game, especially in the second half. Ultimately, though, they still had a lot of stuff bounce against them. And so they can play a bad game, especially second half. They did not finish in the first half. They outplayed them in the first half, but they had a fumble that did not go their way. And backyard football is not something that you can say is a replicatable form of football, frankly. And that is what you saw in the second half. Did the Titans give up a ton of deep passes? Did they give up big plays? Absolutely. But you can't have a sustainable offense as a team that says, hey, bounce the football back to the quarterback run around, dodge the outside linebacker, run outside, and then throw it deep and hope that your wide receiver got open. And also hopes that the refs then call PI. That is not something that you can say is sustainable. And that's frankly what the Jets did. And that is not a knock on the Jets, because frankly, when they drafted Zach Wilson, they wanted him to be Patrick Mahomes. That is the guy that they saw to come out there and be the guy that they can build an offense, build a team around. What you saw is what they saw today. But I don't think it's sustainable long term. Now, he could prove me wrong, but Zach Wilson, and when you look at Patrick Mahomes, there's a lot of people that have played that way that have not been Patrick Mahomes, more so than the people that have turned out to be that kind of player. So if Zach Wilson keeps playing that way, congratulations, you pat your hat. There's no way to defend that. There's no way you coach against that, because frankly, when it comes down to playing backyard football and going into a scramble drill on every single play, that's just not something that you can truly sustain either way, defense or offensively.
I don't even really know where to go from here. I'm so damn frustrated.
Burn it down.
Well, now you're going to find out. You are going to find out what this Titans team is from here. I think that you're going to see if they come out flat against the Jags. And I think it's time to start accepting as a fan base that this is just not the team you thought it was going to be, and they're not going to be competitive. They still may win the South, as sad as it sounds. They still may lose a few more games like this and still win the South somehow. But I don't think that should give you big hope for their end result. I mean, this is not a team that, we can talk about this too, but what Bama Brad just brought up about them going for two, not letting it get to overtime. I kind of, obviously the results, what they are now, it's easy to say that, but again, I kind of agree with that just because you're on the road. And my whole thing about going for two is if you're on the road, but the caveat to that is always, if you're the worst team, always go for two. I didn't feel like the Titans were the worst team, and they did hold them somehow to a field goal to give themselves a chance to win the game. But then the inept offense somehow drove down the field and then just sputtered. So obviously going for two wins it. But let me ask you this as a group, and Lebowski, I'm sorry for asking a leading question here. Is everyone okay if the Titans go for two and lose that way, or lose in overtime on a missed field goal?
I had that thought leading up to the end of the game of Titans score here, or the Titans do score. Do you go for two? I was leaning towards go for two, for selfish reason, because I just wanted it to end. But at the same time, I felt that the stress of the game, I'm blanking on the word here, but the momentum was shifted and had shifted to the Jets and felt like more in control of the Jets side of the ball than the Titans for quite a while in the second half. So my thought process was go for two and end it. If you lose going for two, I feel like I feel better than that than dragging it into overtime. Hindsight's a bitch, but I feel like this is a game for the Titans that if you got the opportunity to go for two and win it, do whatever. Try to get your win and get the hell out of this toxic game, because that's ultimately what this game is. It's toxic. I feel like this is something that guys take back to the locker room and think to themselves, we just handed the Jets their first win in overtime and had to watch them celebrate and beat a team that they know has been hyped up all year. I think it's a toxic game to take back in the locker room.
Yeah,
I agree.
I hated the idea of going for two. I wanted them to kick the field goal and go to overtime, just because of what you said, right? I think that going for two in overtime, or going for two instead of going into overtime, is a great idea if you're on the road as the worst team. But in terms of possession, in terms of yards gained, in terms of offensive plays run, the Titans had been dominating the game in all of those statistics. And so in terms of their ability to, if they got the ball to start in overtime with time left, really what killed them in overtime was not the fact that the Jets went down and nearly scored, if not for a miraculous tackle from Danico Autry on a probably the worst play call from the Jets offense all day long. I hated that play call on the goal line. I hated that play call. If you got a more mobile quarterback than Zach, I like that end on boot scheme, but I think from a guy like that, I don't know, maybe he's more athletic than I think, but regardless,
I think Autry just made a hell of a play, to be honest with you, to snuff that out. Because I think I actually think that was a pretty great play with the fact that their rushing has been very suspect all season. They don't really trust it. Put your hand as your playmaker, who's actually been making plays for you all day. That seemed like a perfect recipe, and just Autry being able to stretch that play out and make the big stop there and force the field goal attempt at that point in time as
correct. Well. Yeah, maybe my judgment on that is just jaded, because earlier in that drive they'd gotten first down by the running back going flying squirrel over the line again, because it worked the first time awful well. But regardless, that's all a side point to my point. What killed them in overtime was not the fact that the Jets down and did put points on the board, though it wasn't. What killed them was that they allowed the Jets to drive long in overtime and take over half of the time left on the clock, because as we've seen before in overtime with the Titans, they were, I believe, 4-0 in the Tannehill era coming into this game in overtime. When they're able to get the ball and have enough time left on the clock, Derrick Henry takes over the game easily, and he runs most, if not all of the plays in overtime, and is wildcat and screen passes and running end around, running up the gut, and it just works. It works at that point in the game with everybody beat down. But because there was so little time left, I believe they started the drive with less than 5 minutes left. They were able to do that at the beginning of the drive, but they were sluggish, and Derrick wasn't able to get out them the way that he does in overtime, and it couldn't have to force the ball.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just
going to say one run on that toss. So
he did almost get away from him.
Hold on. I'm not going to let you finish. I'm not going to go Kanye and say I'm going to let you finish here, because I'm not. Because frankly, there's been several plays in this game where Derrick Henry was really close to bouncing it and taking it to the house. What I will say is we need to give the Jets credit, because that was frankly from a coaching perspective and from playing and doing your job, that was the best game I have seen. Frankly, I can say literally in my lifetime from an inside linebacker core. Quincy Williams and CJ Mosley and their ability to attack, fill the rush lanes, and finish on the tackles was impeccable. They did not miss. They did not miss an assignment. And that is ultimately what I feel like decided the game. And you can say, cool, finish your tackles. That's all you have to do. But if anybody's a Titans fan here and actually sees, when you see Rashaan Evans on his good games, when you see Jayon Brown on his good games, when you see David Long in his good games, there's still a couple of plays here or there. They didn't miss today. They frankly did not miss today. Frankly, when I say CJ Mosley had 10 solo tackles, that is a great game for an inside linebacker. Quincy Williams also had 10 solo tackles. So between the two of them, they had 26 with the combined tackles. I'm saying that those two players combined to have one of the best games from a position group that I can honestly say. I don't feel like I'm being hyperbolic. Just watching it was coaching tape every single down from those two players. And you can only imagine that the entire week that when you're going against Derrick Henry, you have your coaches in your face saying this is your game for your inside linebacker coach. And they showed up. So like the Titans did not play their best game, but those two players showed up, and they deserve the credit because sometimes those two guys. I'm sorry, like the coaching side of me is just like, man, that is exactly what you want to see.
Well, I think that's going to do it. I don't know that I want to talk about this anymore. I'm so disgusted with what I watched. I really hope the Titans find a way to get it.
Can I ask one more question? Because I'm curious what you guys.
I mean, you could ask.
You could ask a question
about this. In this game, and really in this. Am I back?
Yes.
Yes.
Maybe type it in the chat.
No. I got this. Don't fail me now, Wi-Fi. In terms of this season, but in particular this game, what position group is more discouraging to you? The defensive backs or the offensive line?
Offensive line, just because I expect the defensive backs to falter and not be up to par. I expected this offensive line to be close to what they were last year. And the fact that they are not up to par, this offense is not going. You're going to see a lot more games like this if this offensive line cannot figure it out quick.
Offensive line. I mean, I feel like it's a calamity of bad luck, injuries, and team mismanagement that drives me up the wall. You let Dennis Kelly walk. You've got the Isaiah Wilson debacle. You've got Lawan, who plays bad, then plays good, then bitches about being booed, then plays bad again. It's just a calamity of errors, some of which are unforced. And frankly, I'm really, really tired about talking about the O-line. Your quarterback is not going to take 7 sacks a game without him getting seriously injured. And if Tannehill gets seriously injured, this shit's a wrap.
Mm-hmm. Nate Davis needs to find out whatever he had found last year, because he's been missing, especially in pass protection, and that's not something you've seen since he was a rookie.
Let's finish on my note here, which is the best way to stop. So I will say that it's definitely offensive line. When you commit a first-round pick and a second-round pick to the offensive line, neither one of which is actually playing. And when you look at the DBs, frankly, playing Fulton inside, this is a coaching staff that said Fulton is going to be your slot corner last year. They said that's where they're going to play him, and you see him this year. Now, for me, that's not a player's issue. That's a misevaluation from both a personnel and a coaching perspective in saying that that's where that player needs to play. This guy has been a shutdown corner, and I'm saying I don't believe in shutdown corners in today's day and age, but he has been a shutdown corner on the outside, but you're going to move him inside rather than playing Chris Jackson or even Elijah Molden on the slot. And that they are different skills. They are small linebackers to play a true nickel spot. So to move Christian Fulton in there, I don't feel like you're setting him up for success. So for me, it is absolutely offensive line, because frankly, you had the first half where it was we're not being able to pick up the scheme. The defense is getting some wins on us on how they're lining up. The second half, they just kicked your ass. And that's all there is to it. You lost your one-on-one matchups. It is. That's terrible. Hit it again.
That's terrible.
Just terrible. Your Tennessee Titans suck. Lose
That's
to the
terrible.
Jags 27-24. The Titans are in Jacksonville next week against the Jags. Take my
must-win
word for
game.
it. That is now a must-win game. Absolutely. Took the words out of my mouth. That is a must-win game. Before I close out, I do want to go around the table real quick. Jonathan, you and Ryan have a show. We have more than just written media at Broadway. We have plenty of audio media that you can consume us on as well. Jonathan, give me a quick blurb about your show. How can people find you during the week?
Yeah, you can check us out on Coach's Corner. We are live, actually. You can catch it on a podcast on Wednesdays, but you can catch it live Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. We're going to give an X and O's breakdown, assuming that the NFL actually gives us the all-22 breakdown, so we can actually watch the game and see what the DBs and the wide receivers are doing.
Point, yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. We have fun with it. We I think there's actually a joke of the week now. So I got lots of dad jokes that will invest in it.
If the host doesn't forget about the joke of the week.
I'll still get it in. I don't care what the host does.
Easton, you've got a new show with us. Tell us about your podcast.
I do. Podcast is called The Titans 10 with Easton Freeze. Just premiered last week. Hopefully this week it'll be getting its own podcast feed. We cover everything twice a week, Tuesday and Friday at 4 p.m. We cover everything going on during the week that you're missing with the Titans in terms of news, covering the team's press conferences, injury reports, roster moves, talking about the previous game, talking about the next game. It's a 10-minute show, so really easy to throw on your drive home from work or while you're cooking or before you go to bed. Get caught up, get smarter, be informed. The Titans 10.
It. And I'm Mr. Lebowski. We are Football and Other F Words, Zach and I. Shows come out on Tuesday mornings, generally about an hour-long podcast covering Titans, NFL, and we also go off topic a lot, and we curse. So just know that. It's Football and Other F Words. Thank you all for tuning in. Sunday Night Roundtable brought to you by Broadway Sports Media. Really appreciate you coming and hate listening with us because we hated talking about it. We hope you have a good night. Probably don't watch any more football. It's depressing.
The Cardinals are looking great.